Hey y'all, I'm Emily, an almost lifelong quilter with a lot of stories to tell. I have loved quilts and talking about them for as long as I can remember, and I'm here to celebrate the tradition of quilting with you. Join me every other week to get back to your quilting roots. We'll celebrate quilts and the real people who made them, learn a little bit about the history of quilting, and have lots of fun exploring ways to reclaim tradition in a modern world. I'm so glad you're joining me this week here at Patchwork Revival. Hello, friends. This is part 2 of a special episode where I was lucky enough to interview my friends Judi and Anne, a mother-daughter duo, both of whom are a beautiful representation of what it looks like to take a love of quilting and steward it and pass it on to future generations. This episode is focused on, also known as Crafty Moose Quilts. She is a dear friend of mine. She's an encourager, a creator of beautiful heirloom t-shirt quilts, just an all-around awesome woman. I hope you enjoy listening to this interview as much as I enjoyed recording it. You'll hear a few stories and laughs from Judi sprinkled throughout this episode, and I want you to be sure to go back and listen to part 1 if you haven't yet. It's all about Judi, Anne's mom, and it's so fantastic hearing both of their stories together. Okay, so Anne, could you share a brief history of yourself, where you grew up, what you loved growing up, how you got into sewing? Tell us about that.
Okay. The first 10 years of my life, I was in Marion, Iowa. I am the youngest of three girls, and I was completely different than my sisters. They liked to do their hair, and they liked makeup, and they liked to do their nails, and they liked MTV, and I didn't like any of those things. I liked to be outside. I liked catching fireflies and playing tag with my friends and riding our bikes quite literally through the cornfield to get to the community pool in the summers. Um, and that continued. We moved to California for just a brief blip. But while we were there, I met one of my very great friends. Her name's Christy. She's actually a teacher in Texas, which is wild. We both of our families ended up moving to Texas from California. But she taught me how to skateboard. So I just kept picking up all kinds of great traits that my parents were like, "Are you sure you want to continue this? We're not sure you want to continue this. This does not seem safe." So we moved to Texas shortly thereafter, a suburb outside of Dallas, and I went to private school in middle school and in high school. And I played softball, basketball, and volleyball. So again, I was still getting sweaty, and not that I didn't care what I looked like, but it just wasn't my priority, you know? So my basic hairdo in high school was, because I have naturally curly hair, it was wash and condition my hair in the morning, leave it wet, put it in a braid because it would stay better in a braid, and then just go to school like that. Because that was perfect, because then I was all set up for softball practice after school or whatever. My hair was already braided for whatever sport activity was that day. And my mom was the hero of the show for sure with all of these things, because she sat through 100 and who knows what degree temperatures outside. I can remember softball games when it was so cold outside that when you actually hit the ball, it hurt your hands because the bat was so cold, and mom was shivering on the metal bleachers. So she was at everything all the time. And through all of that, the oldest sister, I don't think she really had a lot of interest in crafting and sewing. And then my middle sister, Liz, is quite literally the jack of all trades. She can, like mom was saying earlier, she can sew curtains, she can make pillows, she can hem things, she can build things, she can sand and paint things. If there is a project, she will figure out how to do it, and it will look amazing when she's done. Um, and even, all through high school and college and well into my early years as a mom, I still did not have any interest in any of those things. I enjoyed some crafts. I liked making wreaths and things like that for our front door, but it wasn't like I would never go buy all the things and be like, "Hey, everybody come over, let's go do this thing." It had to be either at one of my sister's houses or at mom's house, or, where they had all the supplies and the know-how, and I was just along for the ride. So in 2010, I was working in ministry, and I actually started to get pretty sick. There was, ooh, that actually might make me cry. There was an incident where I was starting to lose control of my hands a little bit, and I was at a gas station. I was not feeling good that day. I was holding the nozzle, and my hand clamped down on the nozzle, and my brain was saying, let go, like you're spilling gas, let go of everything. And my hand wouldn't let go. So I ended up covered in gasoline, my clothes, my shoes, my everything. And it was a really hard time um, to just feel like you were losing control of your body. So, we start doing all the testing. Is it this? Is it that? Is it this? Is it that? And everything was coming back. No, no, no. So it took about, oh gosh, I think like 10 months. And then in 2011, I was finally diagnosed with a couple of different autoimmune diseases. And on top of that, my immune system was so taxed out that I had developed, it wasn't like an ugly, yucky rash, but it was like a something is not right in your body rash. And it started at my jawline and went all the way down to my toes. So in that period of time, it was very clear I needed to step away from my role in ministry. I was struggling to take care of myself. I really could not do anything around the house. Neighbors jumped in and they were like, we'll take care of getting William to and from school, because he was in elementary school at the time. And then my husband would come home from work and he would try to do all the homework and all the cooking and all that kind of stuff. Meanwhile, I was just trying to take care of myself. So in that period of time when I was trying to work my way back to what the new wellness looked like for me, somewhere in there we had done apron making. My neighborhood girls and I had watched, there was a movie that came out called Julia and Julia, and we thought it would be hilarious to watch the movie while we were all wearing aprons that we made and pearls, and so we tried to figure out the aprons, and of course that was it wasn't disastrous. I wouldn't go that far, but every time the bobbin would get low on thread, I panicked because I was like, I do not know how to put more thread on this thing. Like, can we just go buy them pre-filled? And I inherited Granny's sewing machine. So when she passed away, Mom went to Arizona and cleaned out Granny's entire sewing room. And she came home with Granny's sewing machine. And that's what I used to make aprons with my friends. But it was still sitting in my...
Do you remember what kind of machine it is?
Yeah, it was a FOF.
FOF 2140.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I knew it started with a 2 and it ended with a 40.
I still have mine. It's right.
Yeah,
it's
it was
Okay,
that
so
right
y'all
there.
had matching machines.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So it was way more than I needed to just do basic things. Did not know how to read the patterns for, it was not colossal failure. I ended up with a really cute ruffled apron that I still have. I'll have to take a picture and send it to you, Em.
Yes, please do. We'll put it in the show notes.
I will. I don't think, gosh, back in the day, 2011, we probably had, when did the iPhone come out? Did we even have iPhones yet?
I have no idea.
I
don't know either. I don't even, that might have been like a film camera situation or a digital camera situation. But anyway, so, we finished that project and I packed up all of Granny's fabrics again in her sewing machine and shoved them into the back corner of my crafting closet. And one day I think I was just feeling sorry for myself and feeling like I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't work, I can't take care of my kid very well. And, I was just really down in the dumps. And I happened to walk by the open closet door and I saw all that sitting in there. And just out of arrogance and I don't think spite is the right word. I'm not really sure what the right word is. It was like teenage angst in a 30-year-old, whatever that is.
Yeah, what my grandparents would say is you got a wild hair.
I did.
Yes.
I did get a wild hair.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I saw it sitting there and I thought, I can make a quilt like Granny did. I could totally do that. So I started pulling things out and I kind of pilfered through the fabric and I looked at things and thought, okay, well, there wasn't really a whole lot that matched per se, but it was close enough. So I thought, okay, well, I could I could stand these together and that together and whatever. Um, and I knew zero about quilts. I did not know what a 1/4 inch seam was. I don't think I owned a rotary cutter yet. I definitely did not have a cutting mat yet. Um, I mean, I knew nothing. I did not even know that you had to iron things after you sewed them. Like, I knew nothing. So I kind of sketched out from memory, like, what does a quilt look like? And I just did big squares, and then I just did like a 4 patch square. And I sort of alternated them and, mishmashed them around or whatever, and cut it all with scissors. And tried to piece this thing together, all the while praising Granny for having ordered pre-wound bobbins. It was like the legacy gift from my grandmother to me to teach me how to sew. She had no idea that that was going to be the thing that would help me get along the way to sewing, but it definitely was. I jumped onto YouTube. I learned a couple of things, but then, like Mom said, I ended up with this quilt top, and it was like, I really don't know what I'm doing. I would like to add a border to this thing. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to this. I don't know how to that. So, we laid the whole thing out, and Mom was like, okay, well, first of all, let me teach you about a 1/4 inch seam. Second, let me show you the machine foot that Granny actually had that is specifically for a 1/4 inch seam. I had a 1/4 inch seam foot, and I didn't even know it. So
Why would you?
I know, right? I had no idea. So Mom taught me about how things have to be square, especially if you're going to add borders, because otherwise you have one that's super long and one that is not, and you end up with the trapezoid, which nobody wants in a quilt. So we got the borders figured out, and I was actually sewing the borders on at my sister Liz's house at the same time that Mom and Liz were finishing one of Granny's quilts, which was also Mom's first quilt. And I did not know that until yesterday. Mom and I were sitting next to each other at the dinner table, and I said, "What was your first quilt?" And she said, "Well, it was when we were working on the one for Josh and Maggie." And I was like, "Wait, that's when I was making my first quilt." And we were like, "Oh my gosh, we were doing our first quilts at the same time." So that's kind of neat in hindsight. I didn't realize that. So then, not only did I totally wing it through making a quilt top, but then I went all in. Mom had some books about free motion quilting, and she's like, "Oh, here, read this." I didn't know any different. I did not know that that was like next level quilting. I had no clue. So Granny had a machine where the feed dogs would drop. So, you're removing all the tension and you're moving the fabric yourself. And I think I bought gardening gloves to start with. So they had that little bit of tackiness on the fingers, right? Because I didn't even know that free motion quilting gloves were a thing. And I also am kind of a rebel, where I'll see something online and I'm like, I don't think I need to go spend $40 on that. I think I can go to the dollar store and find something that'll work just as well. So they were probably dollar store gardening gloves. That's probably what they were. I did not know anything about stitch regulation. So the free motion quilting is, if we measured the stitches, they would probably be like 0.0001 millimeters. It's so bad. I just kept my foot down on that pedal, and even if I wasn't even moving the fabric very much, it was just sewing away. So I finished it. I bound it. I have it right here. I'm gonna pull it out. It's one of my favorite quilts. I use it all the time.
I love
Here
it.
she is. Yes. So my little 4 patches and my big blocks.
Yeah. She's beautiful. We'll share pictures. We'll put pictures in the show notes. That's the hard thing about a podcast is we're talking about this and raving about it, but we'll definitely share pictures. So
yeah. So this was my first one. I don't really remember what happened next in terms of which quilts came next, but I think the one that is, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, but the one that is probably the most special to me is this one. These were random fabrics again, probably like Joann's and Walmart and things like that. This was a free pattern I found online. It is not square. The thing that's special to me about this one is when I made it, I actually had intentions of putting it into as part of the fundraiser. And I have a group of friends. We've been friends for, gosh, 25 years, I think is how long I've been in the group. And we originally were scrapbookers. So we would get together and we would work on our scrapbooks for, entire weekends together. Well, they bid on the quilt and won it so that I could keep it. So my friends bought my own quilt back for me. And when I was hospitalized with COVID in 2021, I had a really sweet nurse. He came in and he said, "You're going to be here for a while. And what I recommend is having your husband bring you some things from home because it will bring you some comfort. It will remind you of what's at home waiting for you." So John brought me this quilt. So this was on my hospital bed with me when I had COVID. And I think I washed it like 3 or 4 times after I got home from the hospital because, that's kind of gross. But
yeah, hospitals are the most
I know
germy places, but
I know. And it wasn't,
it's fine. You washed it.
That's right. That's right. So this one is probably the most meaningful to me. Just because there's so many different layers of story
Meaning
in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of layers of love.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that's your most treasured quilt. I love it. So how did you get into t-shirt quilting? Because that's what we know you. We know you for all different things, but t-shirt quilt queen.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to know how you started on that journey.
So our church was celebrating, I think, their 10th anniversary of being in existence. And it's a very unique structure at the church where there's actually 2 head pastors. And it was super last minute. Someone came and found me and said, "Hey, we're doing this big surprise and this big celebration. Would you be willing to make quilts from the t-shirts of all of their," because there's always a t-shirt for something. There's a big event, there's a t-shirt for it. Or they had denim shirts that had their very first church logo, which had evolved along the way, but things like that. And they were like, "Is that something you can do?" And I was like, "I have no clue, but I'm going to figure it out because there's tons of stuff on YouTube. I'll figure it out." So I went through a lot of different interfacing fiascos. Not all interfacing is created for t-shirt quilts. And I finally landed on, actually, that's crazy. It was one of the first interfacings I found that actually worked when I went through "I'd like a 1/4 yard of all of these, please," so that I could test them all out and see which ones were the best ones. But Pellin SF101 is still one of the ones that I recommend to people. And that was the one I landed on then. And then it was just crazy word of mouth. "Hey, I saw what you did. Can you make me one? Can you make me one?" And after a time period of not being well and being at home, I was working full time and I was doing t-shirt quilts on the side for people. But then, that was 2016, 15. I don't even know.
You also
somewhere in there.
I also have to add that you're not only making a quilt, but you were quilting them on that small machine.
Yes.
She was doing all of it.
Yes, I forgot about that. That's a really good point, Mom. So
yeah,
I actually,
that is very time consuming. I mean,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't do straight line quilting because I found that trying to stitch through the vinyl on t-shirts was not going well, like ever. And once you poke holes in vinyl, then it just looks really bad. So I got extremely proficient at free motion quilting, and I would actually use, let's say you have a Chicago Bulls t-shirt. So I would get really good at doing echo stitching around the bowl and then continuing it all the way out to fill the whole square. But I would do each individual t-shirt was quilted completely different.
So it was completely custom layout, custom quilted.
Yes.
Yes.
Custom everything. Yes. So when our son was diagnosed with some medical issues, it became really clear that either my husband or I had to leave our job, so that we could be a full-time parent and really be all in to help him through what he was facing. And it just made more sense. I made less than John did. His insurance was better than mine. It just made sense that I was the one. And that is when my business completely blew up in the best of ways. Like, oh, she's not working full time anymore. Now she can do my quilt. And now I'm at a point where January through May is completely insane. Right now on my board, I have 9 quilts for this month. And I have 9 again next month and 9 again the month after that. And it books up like 2 years in advance. And I really did no advertising. I didn't set anything out there that was like, hey, I'm doing this thing. But eventually I did create a Facebook page. And that was really my hub for a long time. But now I have a website and now I have a booking system. And, it's just evolved all along the way. But, my mom really, she has always been the entrepreneur in the family. And I think I just kind of picked up some of that spirit from her. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to build this thing. I'm going to do this stuff. I'm going to figure out the right pricing for this. And in that, I think both of us, sometimes we get so lost in the creative side of things that we forget that there's other parts of life that are important, like eating or going to bed at a reasonable time or the laundry or whatever. So there's a lot that I picked up from my mom along the way. Especially in the world of being an entrepreneur, and you figure it out. You build it, you figure it out. You're going to make mistakes and you pick yourself up and you turn yourself around and you go, okay, here we go. I'm going back in. I'm going to do this thing again. But the thing that I love the most about t-shirt quilts, because they're not, it's not a masterpiece quilt kind of situation. It's not everything matches and everything is perfectly balanced. And, it's not always the most aesthetically pleasing because there's so many things that are competing for attention in a t-shirt quilt. For me, it's the story that's in a t-shirt quilt. Just recently, I had a lady, all 3 of her kids are grown. I think her youngest is 25 now. But one of her boys has some medical issues and he's got a homeless situation going on and his future does not look great at this moment. And when she sits at my kitchen table and pulls out all of these things from his childhood and she's completely in a puddle of tears and she's trusting me with this entire bin of every single one of the memories that brings her to tears, it's a really important and serious job for me. It's not just I'm going to make $400 on this quilt. It's not about the money at all at that point. Yes, I still need to be compensated for my time because this is a job and it is a business. But for me, the most important thing is making sure that I'm treating all of her memories as like living physical memories. It's not just a random t-shirt that I'm going to hack into or whatever. And it gets challenging sometimes. She actually had all 3 of her kids. It's actually really adorable. They made matching reindeer shirts with puffy paint. With little googly eyeballs, and then the antlers are they're her kids' handprints. So the hard thing there is when you're doing long arm quilting, you can't stitch through puffy paint and you can't stitch through googly eyes. So my long arm quilter is absolutely amazing. She's in Allen, Texas. Their company name is Happy Quilts. It's a husband and wife team, Jeff and Diane. They know that I'm not going to say no to people because those are memories that I'm not willing to leave out. So they have really gotten great at figuring out how to crop out certain sections so that they're not damaging their, I don't even know. Long arms are like what, $30,000 or something. Once you have
I don't know. Something
there's
obscene.
so much money. Yeah. So they have really gotten good at figuring out how. We know Anne's going to bring us crazy things. So how are we going to make it look the best that it can possibly be? Because we know she's not going to say no. Mm-hmm. So it's really been a great ride. I've enjoyed it so much. I really love what I do. There's hardly ever days. If there's a day where I don't feel like working, it's because I'm having trouble with something medically and I just don't feel well. It's not because I don't want to go do whatever the work is that's waiting for me in my office.
Well, let me ask you, so you're making custom pieces for people, but how do you document your contribution to those quilts? Do you tell me about that process that you go through?
Well, that's been a journey also with quilt labels. So originally, my mom digitized my label. So if we go back to my very first business logo, I hand drew it myself on like pencil and paper situation. And then again, did not know what I was doing, scanned it into the computer and tried to figure out how do I turn this into a file that I can actually use on things, if I wanted business cards or if I wanted this or wanted that. So I completely clunky failure sort of pushed my way through that. And then mom said, I can digitize your logo. And I was like, that would be a great way to put quilt labels on the back. But the problem was, again, when you don't know what you don't know, you kind of fumble your way through it. So at the time we were making, gosh, what were they, Mom? Like 4x4 squares?
4x4. Because we
Yeah.
couldn't make it any narrower because you had crafty www.craftymoose.com at the bottom of the logo. So 4 inches was as low as we could make it and still make it readable.
Yeah. Yeah. So she did that. She digitized it for me and then she would stitch them all out. She would embroider them all. We would match the fabric to the backing fabric so that it wasn't like some kind of odd thing that stood out from the rest of the quilt. I wanted it to blend in and look purposeful, but I also still wanted to kind of leave a mark on it. You know what I mean? Um, but that did not last long because I had to hand sew all of those quilt labels on. And Emily knows full well how much Anne loves hand sewing.
She
I
got
do
that.
not.
She
I
got
do
that
not
from
love hand
me.
sewing.
Yeah, I hate hand sewing too. Yes.
So we decided to upgrade and we made long, skinny labels that I could then put into the binding. So it was the
Mm-hmm.
same situation. Mom figured out the whole customization on her end. She embroidered the labels. Again, we tried to match the fabrics. Um, but my business has gotten so big and everything goes so fast that I was finding it was getting harder and harder to go back and forth with mom. Like, hey, I'm going to mail you this fabric. Hey, can you turn this around and mail these labels to me? Oh, by the way, I need them tomorrow or in 3 days. Is that a problem, mom?
Yeah.
So now I have my logo has changed, and now I use a lady that I found through Etsy. Actually, I think Rachel from So Joyful Studio. I think she's the one that introduced me to this girl on Etsy. But she has I don't know how she prints them out. I have no idea. That's not my wheelhouse at all. All I know is that I order them and I get a sheet of really nice professional looking labels and they're all white, so they do stand out a little bit, but they're nice and small. So it's not like it doesn't look like you flip over the quilt and there's a huge advertisement across the back. Um, so I guess that's really the only way that I leave a mark on them. I I don't necessarily document them for my own purposes, but I do try to get a couple of good pictures of each quilt for every single customer. My family has gotten really good at being good quilt holders.
Mm-hmm.
And we've learned what does and doesn't work. The unfortunate part in Texas, as you know, Emily, is it's almost always windy.
Yeah.
So, or hot. It's either windy or hot or both. So
Yeah.
that is
Usually
really the
both.
biggest, yeah. But that's the biggest challenge is the wind, I think. But yeah, that's really all I do for documentation is make sure that they have pictures of it. So if they want to share it with people that they love, that they have the ability to do that without trying to figure out how do you get a good picture of a quilt.
Because they are really hard to photograph. I mean, they are, I think, one of the more challenging things to photograph and make it
Agreed.
look good. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I sort of know some of the answer to this, but I like to ask people about, is quilting for you a really individual kind of solo thing that you do? Do you quilt with people? Do you go to meetings? Are you in a guild? Talk to me about your community.
Sure. My biggest and baddest and most amazing community is called the Nine Patch Quilt Collective, and Emily is a part of that. There are nine of us quilt designers. We all took a course together in 2022, and we just, I mean, we just stuck, and it just is the best. It is the best group I've ever been a part of in a creative environment, because typically when you're in a creative environment there's kind of like this push and pull of this, my stuff is better than yours, or oh that's ugly, or I don't want to do this with her because she's kind of pretentious, or there's always something when you put a whole bunch of creatives together. And this group has none of those things. This group is full of the kind of support that everybody would want when they're trying to build a business. And there's nine of us who are each doing nine completely different things, and we're all rooting and cheering for each other relentlessly. And it's beautiful. And sometimes I have to pinch myself and remind myself that this is such a gift, and I hope it never goes away.
I know. I'm the same way. And you say that, and I'm like, you know what the best part of it is that we feel really safe to share things with each other, because I know that if I do share something that's ugly, somebody's going to say it, but in a nice way.
Yeah, yeah.
And you have to have that. Like, I don't know if that really looks like you or whatever. But even starting the podcast, I was like, looking back on this, I never would have done this if this was just me. I don't know. I never would have felt like this was something I should do or could do or was approachable, but I just felt like, yeah, this is something that I kind of want to do. And I have people supporting me, and I'm really grateful too. So I'm glad that I'm in your sewing tribe, your quilting tribe, Anne. And I'm really proud of what we have. And it's something that's made me realize how important it is to have a community around you, because a lot of quilting is really about community and story and relationships. So,
Absolutely. And I
Yes.
think, I've been in groups before where on the outside it looks like everything's great and everything's healthy and supportive, but on the inside there's like some fractures. And I think it's really important to pay attention to that. If you don't necessarily feel 100% comfortable, then you have to be careful about what you're sharing. And and I feel like in our group, I mean, I've shared about the surgery that I have coming up and the issues I'm having with different joints and medical things that I face and whatever. It's not, I feel like our group it's beyond quilting. It's become I'm rooting for you in life, not just I'm rooting for you in your business. And it takes everybody has to give something to create the safe space you're talking about. And if people are holding back and they're not willing to help create that, or they're saying things that dismantle that little fractures at a time, then it makes it really hard to have that good solid foundation. And I'm just blown away all the time at the foundation that we have together. It's incredible. But I will say in person, not as much for me. I mean, we're all over the place. Yes, you and I are both in Texas, but Texas is ginormo, and what
yeah,
did we figure out? Like
we're
four
just a
hours?
short, like 4-ish hours from each other.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, I tried to go to a quilt guild once, and something came up, and I couldn't go that day. So I was going to go to their December meeting this past December, and they were doing like these big swaps, and everybody was making their own name tag, and I was so busy with my t-shirt quilt work that I was like, I don't have time to make all the fun trading and name tags, and like I just don't have the time. It's not that I don't value it. I think there's lots of value in it. I'm just not in a place in my life where it has enough value to bump it up on the list of things that need to get done. So I don't necessarily get out and get into groups. I probably should more often. I just don't know. I think that sometimes there's a season for everything, and I'm just not sure that's the season for me right now. And that's okay. that season will probably come at some point. I just don't think it's today.
Yeah, I get that because I think a lot of what kept me from being involved in my local group was just my time of life. I was really busy and I didn't feel like I could integrate, like, I didn't have a lot of myself left to like give to the group. And so,
Yeah.
but now I've started going, things have changed a little bit and stuff. So I think you're totally right. There's something for everyone and you got to start somewhere. But I even like you and your mom, y'all have a little community that's, you have a space in your relationship that has a common ground of quilting. And it's a great way to meet people, to grow, to do all kinds of stuff like that. So I think it's important to share because I do feel like now more than ever, we have to find ways that we support each other.
Yes.
Agreed.
Agree. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Anne is, well, she talked about she's having surgery, so she asked me yesterday. So she says, so if I have all these quilt squares cut out, will you sew them to come and sew them together for me? I'm thinking, okay, hope my work is as good as yours to finish these t-shirt quilts. But it's
Yeah.
not it's really wonderful that Ann and I have. I mean, we're mother daughter, but we're friends and we're sewing friends and we're quilting friends. And if I'm working on a project, she'll come help me. Or if she's working on some stuff, I'll say, sure, I'll come spend a day. I'll stand at the ironing board and do the interfacing, or I'll sit at the machine and do the 1/4 inch seams. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, very accurately. Yeah, sewing friends are special friends for sure.
Definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's nothing like tag teaming a quilt. I mean, I can remember, I think it was Uncle Jack's quilt that we put together just in one day. I mean, we went from yardage of fabric to completed quilt top in one day. And it was, I would cut something and I would hand her two pieces and I would say, sew this to this. And then she'd turn around and hand it back and I would iron it and I'd pick up something else and I'd say, sew this to this. It was like and we had fun in the process,
Yeah.
chatting about different things and pulling out the seam ripper because we got too busy chatting that we realized we sewed the wrong thing to the wrong thing.
It happens to everyone. Two brains, even.
Yes.
Well, what else? What else should we talk about? I feel like we've talked about. Oh, you know what? I want to ask you, Anne. I want to ask you. Have you taught anyone else how to sew? You have a lot of knowledge in your noggin, and how do you see that being put out into the world and perpetuated?
So I actually held a course in my house. I think there were probably like 7 or 8 ladies who came, all different age levels, and we found a free pattern from the Moda website. And we didn't make a single thing. We pulled out tools. We walked through the pattern. We took highlighters and different colored pens, and we would find anywhere that it said 1/4 inch seam, and then we would stop with that and we would pull out the 1/4 seam foot, or we would pull out a ruler, or we'd all look at the sewing machine, like what does it actually look like on a sewing machine. So not necessarily turning around and having 8 sewing machines going at the same time, because I just did it out of my house, so I didn't really have space for that. But we walked through all of the details and all of the basic things that you need to know to get started that I probably needed when I got started, but I didn't know them. And what's really neat is one of the ladies, not all of them, but one of them has tagged me multiple times throughout the years and just said, I'm so grateful for that course that Anne had at her house because I learned about this and I learned about that. And now she makes unbelievable things. And I really wanted to keep that up, but we always seem to come into these phases of life where it is just hard. Pure insanity,
Mm-hmm.
busy schedule, and hard. We've lost both of John's parents. His mom was sick long distance, and that was right on the heels of the issues that our son was having. So we spent, I think it was February through mid-June, where Either John was home in Texas with our son, or he was up staying in a hotel in Kentucky, and I was doing the opposite. So we were just constantly going back and forth for about 6 solid months. But it just seems like we have these time periods in our lives where things get really hard and really heavy, and we just don't have the space to take on bigger things like that. But right now, how I see that continuing into the future is I'm currently writing my t-shirt tiles patterns, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
super ridiculously excited about them because they have been in the works for almost an entire year. They're written in such a way that each individual pattern has a lot of the same information, but I did that because no matter which one you pick up, I want you to feel like you have everything you need all in one pattern. And you will. You'll have everything from what interfacing do I buy to how do I use interfacing? Like, what is going to happen when I pull out my hot iron with this stuff that you told, this expensive stuff that you told me to buy, you know? And I'm actually going to do a separate course for people who want to try to build their own t-shirt quilt businesses, because I will tell you, there are some online places where you can get a t-shirt blanket, but there's no interfacing. Those t-shirts are going to stretch, they might rip. Um, it might be great for a short term, low cost situation. But if you're wanting something like the customer I was telling you about before, whose son is just facing some insurmountable, difficult things, she wants to preserve those memories forever. And that is not a t shirt blanket where there's no batting, no quilting, no interfacing, none of that. That really needs to be something that is preservable in a legitimate t-shirt quilt. So I want to teach other people how to build a business like that, because quilting is not cheap. And I
No.
think, it's great if you can find a Joann's or a Walmart or a whatever that has fabric that you like. There's plenty of different colors and things that are interesting to you. That's fantastic. But what I have found, like my favorite quilt, because of my favorite story, a lot of these fabrics are from Joann's, and they're fraying and they're ripping, and they're just not. This is not gonna. I know this is gonna fall apart on me, and it's not gonna be something that I'll be able to use forever. Um, but it doesn't mean that it's not lovely and it's not amazing, because, like I said, it's my favorite one. It has the most story, and I'll cherish it for as long as it stays together. But I want to help people who have the skill of quilting already. So this is not for beginners. This is intermediate. Like, I already know what a 1/4 inch seam is. I know how to press a seam. I know I know what batting is. I know what long arm quilting is, or whatever. Like, you already have all of that knowledge, but it doesn't always translate into I'm going to make a t-shirt quilt, because it's like two different worlds. It's you can have a car that needs an oil change, but you take it to a tire place, or I don't know, a window tinting place, and you're like, hey, I need an oil change, and they're like, okay, you're not in the right
Yeah.
place for that. They're both work on cars, but it's two very different services. And it's the same thing with t-shirt quilts. They're both quilts, it's just two very different services. So I really want to cater to the people who are kind of in the same bubble that I was in, where it's like, I really want to continue quilting, but this is expensive, and sewing machines are expensive, and all these cool gadgets and templates and rulers and cutters and blades, they're all expensive, and fabric is expensive. How can I supplement all of these purchases with some income coming in, and I have this tool? I know how to quilt. And sometimes I see people who, they'll set up an Etsy site or something like that, and they try to sell all of the quilt tops that they've made, or they try to sell their finished quilts that they've made, and the same quilts are still sitting there a year later, because what you love may not be what everyone else
Mm-hmm.
loves. And maybe it's not perfection, whatever you have out there that's for sale. But when you take someone's memories and it's completely customized to them, for them, with colors they love, I really feel like that is a surefire way to bring in some extra income for yourself, to either support your family or to support your quilting hobby.
Yes, your quilting habit.
Can I tell her the story about the very first t-shirt quilt that I made for you? For all of
I forgot about that one. I still have it.
oh, this I knew nothing. I know how to sew. I knew a 1/4 inch seam. I knew that we needed to put all these t-shirts in there, and I stitched in the ditch in between after I put the batting with the backing and put all that together. And what's it weigh? 50 pounds? I don't know.
Yeah, but again, it's because we just didn't know what we were
We
doing.
didn't know.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't want like a, back in the day, you would go to any box store to get a baby quilt, and it was like a big, lightweight, floofy,
Hmm.
it didn't feel like a quilt of today. It just didn't.
Yeah, it was like that high loft, like
Yes.
Yeah.
poly. Yeah, like a
Yes. Like,
comforter, not a quilt, sort of.
uh-huh. Yeah, like in
Hmm.
Texas, it would become a tumbleweed and it would just float right down the street because it was so
Yeah.
lightweight. And I didn't want that, so I said, hey, let's use denim on the back.
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
So that's what we did, and it is super heavy. And I actually have thought about ripping that apart, leaving the top how it is, but ripping it apart to get the backing and the batting off, and then doing it properly and sending it to a long arm quilter. And
But
I don't
it,
know if I ever will, but then
but
I
I,
feel like I could actually use it.
yeah, but I never used interfacing on the back of those, did I? I didn't
Oh, I
think I
don't
did.
know. Maybe it's better
Yeah.
to leave it how it is. I
I
don't know.
I think you're going to be getting into more of a project than you think if you take that apart. Oh,
Yeah, there might not be the best surprises in there,
yeah.
maybe.
Hmm.
Maybe not.
Well, I have really loved hearing y'all talk about stories. I've loved hearing y'all's sort of joint stories and your chemistry together, and learn all about your sewing friendship and your sewing relationship and your community together. So, Judy and Anne, thank you so much for sitting and talking with me.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Yes, thanks for having me.
All right. Okay, friends, this wraps up our two-part series featuring our friends Judy Jaxa and Anne Scahill. I feel so lucky to have been able to record and publish their stories, and I hope you loved listening to their stories and feeling inspired to connect with another quilter or sewist and just to start building that friendship and connection. It will last a lifetime. Don't forget, subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. Be sure to leave a rave review while you're at it. Jump down to those show notes to find links for this show, as well as a link to my shop where you can enjoy 15% off as a podcast listener with code REVIVAL. That's REVIVAL. From family heirlooms to thrift store finds, Patchwork Revival is here to celebrate the generational connection made in the quilts we love. I'll see you next time.